Meeple Nation Podcast, Episode 373, King and Queendomino.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
GameToppersLLC.com. Have you ever wondered what would it take to make your gaming experience befit a lord? I know. And that is because GameToppersLLC.com. It has made the experience just so much more. I don't even know how to quantify it.
Royal?
It is something that you just...
Noble?
Yes, you just need to experience in your life. And the only way you can do that is by going to GameToppersLLC.com.
I'm Lord Nathan Howard, and I approved this ad.
They need to come up with a Lord Mat.
Lord Matt.
Some sort of Scottish thing for Logan and Nathan, because they're Scottish lords.
I was so close the other day to buying it for you guys.
I'm really upset that you didn't now that you mentioned that.
Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I am Andy Holiday.
I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave
I'm Lord Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holiday.
And
Measly old Dave Holiday, the peasant.
And I am Lord Logan Howard. And we are the hosts of Meeple Nation.
Andy Poops already said that. Of course, that was peasant.
It was just me saying
Yeah,
it, though.
right.
So this week we're talking about King Domino. King Domino is a 2 to 4 player game that plays in 15 minutes. It is designed by Bruno Cathala, and it is released by Blue Orange Games. And then we are also talking about Queendomino, which is also 2 to 4, but it has a longer playtime of 25 minutes. Both designed by Bruno, both released by Blue Orange Games. So why did we pick these games to do together? They have a similar name because these two games can actually be played together. You can play King Domino by itself. You can play Queendomino by itself. But then, if you're talking real crazy, you can actually combine your King Domino and your Queendomino tiles and play the games together. In King Domino, you are lords seeking a new land in which to expand your kingdom. You must explore all the lands, including the wheat fields, lakes, mountains, the mines, spot the best plots, while competing with other lords to acquire them first. The game uses tiles with 2 sections. Sometimes those tiles have the same terrain on both sections of the tile.
Is that 2-section tile anything like a domino?
It's exactly like a domino. Thus, probably the name King and Queendomino. When you play your tiles, each player's tableau, you start with a center castle. Any terrain can be built orthogonally to that castle. However, once you're beyond the walls of the castle, to add a domino, at least one section of that domino has to match the terrain that is touching orthogonally. And this play also will play right over with Queendomino. Same types of things. Queendomino has a little bit of changes. For the most part, both games are going to follow the very same pattern.
I remember when I very first was introduced to this game. I was first introduced to this game a while ago. I played it once, and then I didn't play it until you and I, Nathan, started playing it together online all the time. I think it was you and Ryan and I that played it that first time, and when you were explaining it to me, I remember right away just thinking, oh, this is cool, just like domino. When you're playing dominoes and you have a domino that has 8 pips or whatever, in order to play the next domino, it has to have at least one side that has the 8 pips as well to connect to there. To me, it was just like, oh, cool. They've made a board game that has some of that domino style to it. So I was kind of excited about it. Turns out we played it, and I was like, that's pretty fun. Pretty simple and fun at the same time. It was really good.
And it's a short game, right? That 15-minute time frame is great for, like you said, it's a very accessible game. It's an easy game. I would consider this a gateway-style game.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple, it's short, and it's available on Board Game Arena, too. So.
Right.
The nice thing about Queendomino is it does add a little bit more complexity to it, and more fun, in my opinion.
You got to have reason for those 10 extra minutes, right?
Absolutely, but I enjoy Queendomino so much more than Kingdomino. You have a different terrain type. In Queendomino, you have building sites that you can build buildings on. On those sites, you can also gain towers and knights throughout the game, which can score you more points. The buildings will each have different abilities on them. Many of them will be different ways to score points at the end of the game as well. So much better, I thought, adding those buildings and just that, adding a little bit more complexity and a little more flavor to it, I thought was great.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had King Domino, played it a couple of times. Dave, you played it with us in person the first time. And then I bought Queen Domino, and I wasn't really sold on King Domino, so I ended up culling. But now it's probably a game that I'll actually probably reacquire. Just because there are groups that this game works perfect for. Groups that I play with, right? When I play games with my wife or my family, this is a perfect game for them. The time frame, the simplicity of it. Actually, my daughter and I have been playing on Board Game Arena too, which I have a hard time playing with her because Dave and I, we already hit my 10 for 10 on that, right? So it's no longer on my 30 for 10. Kind of struggle. I was like, well, we got to find new games to play. She really likes it, so we've been playing it a lot. I really enjoy the game.
Back to kind of the domino, what we were talking about. So as you're placing these dominoes in your tableau in front of you, you mentioned that you start with a castle in the middle, but that castle essentially doesn't necessarily always remain in the middle of your board, because at the end of the game, you're going to have something pretty close to 5x5 grid. And by 5x5, I mean one domino that has two sides. That's going to be 2 of the 5, right? Placing these dominoes, being sure to follow those placement rules, they have to have at least one orthogonally adjacent piece that is the same terrain type. The other side of the domino doesn't matter. It can touch nothing or it can touch whatever. But as you're placing these things, you're going to end up with a 5x5 grid. And there's an advanced game where you can go to 7x7. In doing this, you could start with your castle, build your entire board down and to the right, and then your castle end up in the very top left corner of your board, so it can travel. You're creating this square piece of land built of all these different terrain types.
You hit on something, not necessarily a sore spot with me, but an overlooked spot. When I'm explaining the game to people, I tend to forget that they don't realize that castle doesn't necessarily have to be the center of their map.
Right.
Logan, even when we played the first game with you with Queen Domino, I think you came to the same conclusion that you didn't realize that your castle didn't have to be in the middle. Started to build off to the side, and what are you guys doing? The castle's supposed to be in the middle.
My visual understanding of it, when you tell me like 5x5, 7x5 grid, and I'm just thinking, oh yeah, well this needs to be here. Opened up worlds of possibilities to me when you pointed that. I was like, oh, I can go down this way. That's much more advantageous to me.
Yeah. That when I've explained the game, and I've explained it a couple of times, and I explained it to Ashley online, she got frustrated too that she couldn't, worried that her castle was no longer centered, that she wasn't going to be able to correct that through gameplay, and she was like, this game's done.
While it doesn't have to be, it is supposed to be centered.
Only in your head. Well, I guess, I'm sure you're probably not the only one, Dave, but yes, for those who don't live in the OCD world, it can be anywhere in that grid, whether it's a 5x5 grid or 7x7 grid. Scoring points in this game is very simple too. You score points in the forest area. In the forest region, there's going to be houses. In the field areas, I believe there's windmills, lakes, there's boats, there's mines in the mountain areas, and I can't remember.
So anything that has a feature will have a crown on the tile itself, right, which will indicate that it's a point scoring tile.
When you're scoring at the end of the game, you will look for those crowns, and you will count the number of those crowns in a contained field, meaning that area has to be a contiguous group of like terrain, and that doesn't have to be a square, Dave. It can be any shape, but as long as that same terrain is contiguously connected, then you will count up the number of domino spaces, and then you will multiply that by the number of crowns that are within that plot. Just a simple mathematics like that, so it's 3 crowns times 6 tiles. I scored 18 points for that field, or I scored 3 times 5, 15 points in that lake. Compile all those points together, and that's your final score. And so you can have a lake here and a lake on the other side of your grid as well, and each of them can be giving you different points. However, if at some point you could connect those, that factor that you're multiplying becomes exponentially larger, far more advantageous to you, and will give you more points.
The one thing that these two games do share is the turn order mechanic that is... There are the dominoes that are going to be during that round, and then the ones that are coming up for next round. Starting with the player who has their meeple on the top of the first column, that's the domino they're going to take. They'll take their domino, they'll play their domino, and then they will place the next column on whichever domino they want. And that will also indicate, number one, the domino they get next round, and number two, what turn order they're going to be playing. The reason why turn order matters is because that is the turn order in which you will be able to pick your domino for the subsequent round. Place the dominoes in that column. All the dominoes have a number on the back, and you're going to place them in numerical order, lowest going down to the highest number. The higher the number, the more likely you are to score points with that domino. Turn order does matter a lot in this game. There may be dominoes that are out there that, man, I really want that domino, but am I going to get messed over for the next round by not being able to pick something good? I thought that was a cool way to not just determine player order, but to add a different level of strategy also into a fairly simple game, but it definitely adds a level of strategy to it.
Just that mechanic itself is extremely simple, too. It took me just a minute to go, okay, I get that. And I was like, that's really cool. I like the way that they did that.
I always get intrigued by games that mess with turn order. It's always a mix about whether or not I should go for the better turn order or the better tile or card. It's always an internal struggle. Sometimes it's better to go with the better turn order or not. And when we played Queendomino, I was trying to get a lot of farms, and those were typically some of the cheaper cards, so it made sense for me to do that. Go for the earlier in the turn so I can get the farms that I wanted to build my farms to be worth more points to me.
So they weren't necessarily cheaper, but they had a lower number, so they were higher on the column list. So
well, it's just like what Andy was saying, was like the higher number on that column list was typically where you're going to score the more points.
Right, so the bottom of the column.
Right.
You're spot on, I think, Lou. It depends on what stage of the game you're in. If it's going to be more advantageous to... I'm going to try to go first next round so that hopefully the following round I'll have a better choice of what's coming up. Like in the example you used, Logan, you're building your farms. You can take a cheap, and I hate to use the word cheap, you're not paying for anything, but you can claim the less important tile, which will allow you to go first the next round, and hopefully coming out, you'll have an opportunity to claim a tile that will give you more points for those farms.
It's all luck, too. You don't know if you're trying to go for like the higher in the turn order, what actually gets revealed, because it could be advantageous, it could not be.
You're absolutely right. That's kind of the risk. You're trying to balance that. There's no way to really balance it, right? You're just trying to hope that if I sacrifice this round going first, then next round I'm hopefully going to go big. Then at the same point, if you're trying to go first and then the next round's kind of a bust, well, I guess you can go first again. If you keep trying to go first to get those less valuable tiles, chances are your kingdom is going to be less valuable if you fill it with less valuable tiles.
Ultimately, like you said, Nate, toward the end of the game, quite often it really changes the way you play that. Because, yeah, there's definitely probability involved. You can look at a list of what tiles are in the game, and you can look out on the board and see what is in everybody's kingdom, and you can go, okay, so there's these ones left. These are the ones that I really, really, really want to get. Say there's 2 turns left where we flip new dominoes, and there's 2 tiles that I really want to get that are still out there. I need to try and go first these 2 rounds. So definitely there's a lot of luck in when it goes, especially early in the game. Later in the game, probability starts to play a bigger role.
More of an edge,
guess.
yeah.
So for Queendomino, during the course of the game, you actually start the game with knights. And throughout the course of the game, as you build buildings, you're going to gain additional knights. And what you can do with the knights is you will send the knights into your principality or into these different lands, and they're going to collect taxes. So you can place up to 2 knights every single time you place a domino. Depending on where you place the knight, they're going to gain 1 coin for every space in that region that you're placing him. So if you place a knight into a field area that has 4 squares in size, you're going to gain 4 coins. So you use these coins to purchase buildings. One thing that I thought was cool about some of the buildings in Queendomino, going back to the buildings, in Kingdomino, you always want to basically have the regions that are like each other together. So well, some of the buildings actually give you benefits and points for having different separate regions. There's a building that, for example, gives you 2 points for every separate region of grasslands. If you have 4 different regions that are 1 square each, that's giving you 8 points.
Which is huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
I used that to my advantage in our last play of it. They have that same tile, basically, for each terrain
I think
type.
so, yeah.
And I saw early on that they had one in the construction site terrain, this point early in the game, I was unable to get many of these construction sites. I was like, well, gosh, you know what? I'm just going to go for that one and not worry about keeping them together. In fact, I will keep trying to get them, but I've been fairly unlucky so far. If I can keep getting them, and I'll just plan on not having them together. It actually worked out great.
In fact, you scored a lot of points because of that. Just one of the things, once
You
again,
ended up winning because of that.
he did.
Did I? I couldn't remember.
You did end up winning because of that. Yeah, that was a great move on your part, especially considering the fact that the construction sites were taken so quickly, pretty much every round for the first several rounds anyway.
Right.
So there's a track that the buildings come on, and the building that is furthest to the right is the cheapest building, and then it gets more expensive as you go closer to the stack of buildings. One thing to note is there's actually a queen that will come and visit your town. If the queen comes to visit you, then you actually get a discount on building a building of 1. So if you happen to have the queen in your city at the time, you pay 1 less coin. There's also a dragon. I don't think any of us used the dragon when we all played. Basically, pay the dragon gold, and he'll come in and burn one of those buildings that's in the road to purchase. Takes it out of the game. So if there's a building that's going to benefit somebody else, or even something you want, but you know you're not going to get it, and it's maybe Logan really wants it, you know it's not coming to you, you can burn the building. As you're building these buildings anyway, you gain towers. You can get points for the number of towers that you... I believe one of my buildings gave me points for towers the last time we played. I think Dave had the other one. So whenever you build a building, sometimes it'll have towers on the upper corner. That tells you how many towers you can build. There will be other buildings that will allow you... The player that has the most towers built is who the queen is going to go visit. You're going to gain that discount for having the most towers. On top of that, like I mentioned, if there's buildings that give you bonus points, I was kind of going for towers... And if I could have gotten both of those buildings that gave me bonus points for towers, I would have scored so many points. Probably where most of my points came from were from towers.
And you get a point for each tower at the end of the game, right? Along with each knight that you have
Correct.
in your pool. And there's something else that gives you points.
Not only that, the towers will give you extra coins every time you collect tax as well. Both towers and knights can be very beneficial.
I have to agree with what you said earlier, Andy and Nate. Queendomino to me is definitely the better of the two.
It's more challenging.
It adds more depth. It adds more strategy.
And we as more, I'm going to use my air quotes there, as more experienced gamers, we kind of look for something like that. Like Queendomino definitely has its place, right? I mentioned that earlier. Queendomino has its place. You can play it with beginners. You can play it with lighter gamers. Queendomino, for us in particular, does provide that extra level of strategy.
I was just going to say, I agree with you with the different levels of strategy, but I found that my game buying habits recently is I go to the extremes. It's either I go for like the super long, complicated campaign game, or I go for the super light games. Oftentimes that's where we find ourselves balancing, is we spend so much time on these big, long, epic games that, oh hey, we have 20 minutes, let's break this game out.
And that's the nice thing about Queendomino. Even though it is a little more complex, like Nathan said, it doesn't add a lot more time.
Oh no, half hour is still very easily digestible.
And going along the same line that Nathan's saying, is it being a gateway game, Queendomino is a fantastic game to take that gateway game to the next level. You get someone exposed to board gaming who's new, you play Queendomino a few times, okay, now you know Kingdomino, let's play Queendomino. Just a different layer and just a little bit more complexity, and they're ready for it. So they're not going to get quite so overwhelmed. Same basic concept with a few more things.
I swear we could start a side business selling drugs. It just gets me just extra thing that I need.
First one's free.
Anytime you add buildings that can give you either an in-game benefit or a new way of scoring at the end of the game, that for me is just a huge... I love that. So that's a big darn deal to me.
What's nice about these types of games, different ways to get those points, and you really don't know how it shuffles out until the very end of the game.
That's one of the good things about having that additional aspect of more ways to score points. That way there's not a clear, oh, for me to win, I have to do this. I like having different paths to victory so that you don't always have to do the same thing every single time. You can try something else, try a different strategy. I think that really, for me anyway, that's what makes a great game. If I can play it again and I can do something different and have just as much fun and still have just as much of a chance of winning.
I think it's fantastic with this where you can't count your points until the very end. Because you can be like, I anticipate that I'm going to get this. I'm hoping I can get that extra tile to get me this many points. But it's not until the end of the game that we start counting. We actually find the winner. My strategy did much better than I thought it did. Maybe it didn't do as well as I thought it did. Oh, holy smokes. Can't believe Nathan came out of nowhere and won. Those feelings, it's what creates good memories.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to back up just a little bit. We talked about, how the tiles come out, player order, and all of that. When you first set up this game, you pull out 4 tiles. It has you set up all of the tiles together, face down in a stack or a row, whatever you want to call it. And you pull off the first 4 tiles, put them face down, so there's a number facing up. You arrange them in order, the lowest number at the top, highest number at the bottom, and then you flip them over. You determine turn order to begin with, and then you claim a tile. You don't take it, you just put your meeple on it. As soon as that's done, you shift those tiles over a little bit, you pull 4 more tiles out, and this is where we set up that second set of tiles that we talked about, right? Do the same thing with those, but now whoever's on the top tile takes their meeple, takes the tile, places the tile in their kingdom, and then places their meeple on one of the next 4 face-up tiles. One of the things that I think is really cool about this game is in a 2-player game, they solved the issue of how do we do 2 players very simply. They just made it so that each person has 2 meeples to place. You still have 4 tiles being taken every turn, but it does change the strategy a little bit because you're going to get a little control. You're going to get 2 tiles every turn and you get a little extra control.
2 tiles you can see ahead of time, whereas in
Right,
a
for planning
3-4 player game, you don't see that. Definitely helps you plan your board out. I've never played this 2 players. Playing 2 players sounds like definitely a different game for sure. Yeah.
It is.
Actually, according to BGG, it's best with 2 players.
Actually, I kind of agree. I think it's a great 2-player game. So there is an expansion out for this. It's King Domino Age of Giants. What it does is it adds a couple more tiles. Good news. Adds an extra player.
Yeah. Up to 5 with this
Up to
expansion.
5. And gives you an additional 5 minutes. So there you go.
It has a very cool box thing that dispenses the tiles. That's all I know. I own this expansion. I've never played it. I haven't read the rules for it yet. I have opened it, and I know that I load your tiles up in this dispenser that I believe it has a giant on it. That's how you dispense your tiles instead of it staying inside the box. The reason why you keep them in the box is so you can't see what numbers are coming up. This adds the dispenser to it. You don't have to keep all your tiles in the box.
So you just slide it out the bottom.
Yep.
And then you can sort them out. Is it needed? No, but it does look pretty stinking cool.
Yep.
Also, none of us have played it, but maybe we could have included it in this. I guess we are including it in this podcast now. But is King Domino Duel, which is a 2-player dice rolling game.
Ooh.
20 minutes. So you roll the dice, choose the ones you want, put them together in pairs to create your domino. Domino by domino, fill the map, entrusting the territories of your kingdom to loyal dignitaries. Gather favor from wizards in order to cast powerful spells that will allow you to rule without having to share. It's a great little 2-player dice rolling.
That would definitely add a whole nother layer of randomness. Having the dice involved could be interesting, having that randomness added to it. Or frustrating. Are they 6-sided dice?
Yes, they are.
I'm out.
I don't know. Amara listened to me when I told her that she needs to punish her dice by putting them in the freezer. She'll put them in the freezer for me, and they come back. They work so much better.
Oh, wow. How about that? You've corrupted my children.
I wasn't surprised. I figured it was just a matter of time. I strongly recommend King Domino. I recommend both of them. King Domino is a great introductory game. Like I said earlier, it's a great gateway game. You've only played Queen Domino, right?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's definitely something that I would want to try again. It's just the same issue that other players have. There are good games out there. They don't get to the table because there's other, maybe not better games, but just games that are more desirable at the moment.
I get that for sure.
And so I would definitely not kick it to the side, have regrets the next morning. What did I do with my life because I played Queen Domino or King Domino? Or even King and Queendomino. Haven't even experienced that yet.
You know, I think this is a game that we need to remember that it's a quick game, easy to set up, easy to take down. Maybe one that we do pull out when there's like a half an hour left of game night before Logan turns into a pumpkin, instead of playing Harry Potter for 6 hours.
Yeah, maybe. But that's only when Nate's around with his spreadsheets to tell us how long games take. Otherwise, we make bad decisions, and sometimes those bad decisions are good for us. Who knows?
Well, we had fun, but just keep it on the radar. If we want to play a short game, a quick game, this is definitely one that we know we like, and it's fun, right?
I think that's a great point. And I actually would really love to do them together, too.
I would too.
Do we know how long the time frame is if you put them together?
I haven't played it. Andy, you haven't played it either, right?
Not together, no.
I would anticipate just a little bit longer, but not dramatically.
Yeah, I wouldn't think it would be that much longer. I think it's great. Pairing the two gives you the introduction game, and exactly like you were saying, Andy, once you've got those beginning gamers, you can advance it to the next level if you're trying to introduce new players to games. Like for me, playing with my family, King Domino is a great option, where playing here on game night, Queendomino becomes a greater option.
I actually really like that, because that's something that in our world we like to focus on are either the extreme. We talk about gateway games or those super long, complicated 3.5 hour to play games. These games where you add just a little bit more are almost just as crucial as gateway games. Because I would love to play Queendomino again. I look forward to it. It's just like you were saying, Andy. We just need to keep it in mind for another quick game before I turn into a pumpkin, because I do that on occasion.
On occasion?
Yeah, like twice a week.
I'm kind of along the same lines as Nathan as well. I mean, I would recommend both games, and for very different reasons. Played King Domino first. I had bought King Domino and Queendomino at the same time. I gotta be honest, after playing King Domino, I kind of lost my excitement to play Queendomino. Nathan kind of forced me to teach you guys Queendomino, which I'm glad he did.
He's a good bully that way.
Sitting right here.
Because I thoroughly enjoyed Queendomino. I don't see myself, if I have a choice, bringing King Domino or Queendomino to the table. It'll be Queendomino every single time. Unless I'm playing with somebody that is new, that I know is going to maybe have a hard time grasping all the concepts. They just don't play a lot of board games. I think that's the only time, unless I'm combining the two, that I'll probably ever bring King Domino out.
I agree. Fun game. Queendomino's funner. Gives me more opportunity to do stuff. So that wraps up all of our talking about city building games.
It's been a great journey.
So next week, actually the next 2 weeks, we will actually be with the ladies of Hug, get some of their insights to gaming. Join us the next week for news. We'll be talking about some of the games that are highlights to them. We're excited have our first mock con. Several of us as close friends are getting together to enjoy some games.
Until next time.
We will see you out building your fields. Nope. We will see you out building your kingdom. Whether you're a king or a queen, out building those dominoes.